wizard, the other a rogue.
Now they were both terribly good at their chosen professions. The wizard, for instance, could send a fireball through 5 meters of solid concrete.
The rogue, he could convince you your most prized possession wasn't worth very much, and actually for a small fee he'd take it off your hands.
Despite their differences, both of these chaps, they were terribly good friends. Yeah. They would meet up on occasion when their paths crossed.
Be it in a mansion,
or in a pub,
or the gutter if ceremony required.
But on this occasion, they were in a pub, and they were enjoying a couple of drinks, and as you do, one drink led to another,
followed by another.
And 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 another.
Until the topic of conversation turned to who was the more powerful.
Now, of course, the wizard, he said, of course, I am the most powerful. I could click my fingers and make a building collapse before your very eyes.
Ha, said the rogue. I could talk a king out of his kingdom in no more than half an hour.
And so they argued back and forth for a good long while, until eventually they came to the realization that they were both good in their own special way.
The hell with that. We settled it with a gamble.
A wager.
A bet.
And the bet was this. Whoever could cause the most damage to a single town in a week would be considered the more powerful.
So the only fair way to decide who to go first was to flip a coin. The wizard procured one, and he flipped it high into the air. Caught it in the back of his hand. He was going first, and on the first night of that week, he walked down into town.
In the main square, with a single stick of chalk, he drew huge, elaborate, ornate patterns.
He went from door to door, and he scratched tiny markings into the wood panelling.
He went to the stables of the town, and with a little bag of powder, he sprinkled some in the animals' food, sprinkled some in their water, sprinkled some in their bedding.
And as he was leaving that town, he passed by the well, and he emptied the last of the powder in that bag into the water. Until the next morning, when the first rays of sunlight creeped over the hills, and he walked back into the centre of town, and with a click, a clap, and a stomp, the arcane marks on the floor he'd drawn the previous night began to glow, and the house in front of him began to keen and shudder. Bricks turned to dust, mortar cracked, wood panels split in two, and before long the house was no longer there. In its place was only rubble.
And so then, with a click, clap, and stomp, he was outside a row of houses, and from inside every house he could hear the wails and the cries and the death rattles of the dying. Because in every house whose door he had marked, someone had died in the night, carried off by some mysterious malady.
And with a click, a clap, and a stomp, he was outside the stables, and worse scene of devastation was written. Horses had had their ribs split open, their hearts exploded, and any who were tending to the animals still there, well, they had intestines over their faces. Too much? Sorry. And he left that town in a state of disarray, but the destruction did not end there.
Because he had poisoned the town's water supply. Any man, woman, child, or animal who drank from that well would sicken and die within a matter of hours.
And so when he walked back up that hill to where the rogue stood, he folded his arms, a smug smile on his face, and said, "Better that, my friend. Better that."
And so, a year passed. But the rogue was not idle in this time. He used it to ingratiate himself into the court of the king.
At first he was a friend,
dishing out little tidbits of advice here and there.
and then he became an informal clerk.
Doing a little bit of paperwork here, a little bit of paperwork there.
Then he became one of the king's advisors.
A trusted and steadfast member of the court.
But then he became the grand advisor.
And from there, the only advisor. For who else would you need to give advice to you when you have this young, handsome, charming, wise, modest young man?
And so when the Rogues' Week came about, all he had to do was lean and whisper.
King, I hear terrible news. I hear your son plans to usurp the throne for himself.
The king was shocked and appalled. But this man had given such good advice over the past year, he did not question him. Instead, he only asked for proof.
Here, look, I have this letter from your son that I totally haven't forged just now.
The king read it, and it's in his handwriting. He plans to kill me. What should I do?
You must bring your son to you, make him account for his actions.
And so the king sent his guard to his son's room.
But the rogue was faster. The rogue ran to the prince's room, hammered on the door. Prince, prince, prince! I bring terrible news. Your father, in some fit of madness, he plans to have you executed.
The prince was shocked and appalled, but this man had given such good advice over the past year. He did not question him. All he did was ask for proof.
Look, I have this order for your execution.
It's in his handwriting. What should I do?
You must flee. Go to the summer palace in the countryside. He'll never think to look for you there.
And so that's what the prince did. With nothing but the clothes on his back and the horse that he rode, he was off.
But the rogue returned to the king. And he said, King, 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 I bring terrible news. Your son is fled.
And this was all the evidence the king needed to paint his son a traitor. And he turned to the advisor and said, what should I do?
You must send your men out to hunt for your son and bring him to justice.
And so the order went out. And the king's guard, they searched high and they searched low. There was no avail.
Because the rogue was faster still. He reached the prince, and he said, Prince, 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 I bring terrible news. Your father, he's sending his men out to hunt for you.
And this was all the evidence the prince needed to paint his father as a madman. And so he turned to the rogue and said, what should I do?
You must build an army to defend yourself and to oppose the king.
And so the prince began to recruit. And he recruited farmers.
Plowshares were beaten back into swords.
And he recruited mercenaries.
With money liberated from the palace treasury.
And he recruited drunkards.
Who were not in short supply.
And so it was that the rogue returned to the king.
King, 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 I bring terrible news. Your son is building an army to oppose you.
And so the king turned to the advisor and said, what should I do?
Very simple. You must build a bigger army.
And so the king enlisted, and he enlisted every able-bodied man in the town.
But that meant every able-bodied man. There was no one left to repair the buildings. Bricks crumbled and buildings fell into disrepair.
There were not enough hands to till the fields, and so food ran scarce.
And every animal, every horse, every mule, every oxen was drafted in to haul carts or join the cavalry.
And so on the last day of that week, when father stood opposite son at the head of their armies, the rogue was standing next to the wizard at the top of their hill. And as the two tidal waves of flesh and steel, they moved against one another, the rogue realized he had divided a kingdom in half with his words and brought them to their knees in war. And so he turned to the wizard and he said,
Better that, my friend. Better that.